evening, everybody, and welcome to the Stephen Spender Trust celebration event, which includes the awards of the 2024 Stephen Spender Prize for Poetry and Translation. My name's Charlotte Ryland, and I'm director of the Stephen Spender Trust, which is the charity that founded the Stephen Spender Prize in 2004. So this is the year that we come of age. This is our 21st iteration of the prize. This evening, we'll be celebrating the winners of that prize who come from right across the world and from every generation. But for those of you in the audience who are regulars at this annual event, you may notice a bit of a change. The prize remains a remote activity, which is one of the things that makes it so accessible. To translate a poem, all you need is that poem, some resources to help you decode it, and your own creative voice. So we think of it as an intensely personal exercise that doesn't require any in-person activity. At the Stephen Spender Trust, though, we're aware that in-person experience, collaborating with others, sharing poetry and translation are central to what we do and to what we'll continue to do. We've known for a long time that the act of translation, especially poetry translation, is hugely beneficial to young people. It fuels their creativity, it increases confidence and self-esteem, especially for those who speak languages other than English at home. It consolidates core literacy skills, increases enjoyment in reading and creative writing. It raises the profile of languages in schools. It breaks down languages hierarchies, and it supports community cohesion and well-being. I could go on. So alongside the prize, we've been working over the years to bring this creative translation activity to as many young people as possible through in-person events for pupils and teachers. This evening, as well as celebrating our winners and commendees, we'll also be sharing some of that in-person activity and reflecting on its impact. I suspect I don't need to remind you on this dark November night that we're all going through an extremely challenging time at the moment in terms of intercultural understanding, internationalism, collaboration, empathy. Again, I could go on, but I'll stop there. All of these concepts and ideas and feelings are at the core of this Stephen Spender Prize and of all of the work that we do at the Stephen Spender Trust. So for the next 90 minutes, we promise to show you an alternative vision of a country that is bursting with enthusiasm for listening to and incorporating others' voices, for reflecting on what we share rather than how we differ. Fittingly, we achieve most of this through partnerships. And a lot of what you see tonight would not be possible without collaboration. With hundreds of schools across the UK and Ireland, with arts and educational organisations, and with those who fund our work. Thank you to the Fondation Michalski, to the Old Possums Practical Trust, the John S. Cohen Foundation, and the Golzenkott Foundation for supporting this year's prize. And to the Rothschild Foundation, John Lyons Charity, several local authorities and universities for making possible the in-person work that we do in schools. We send our sincere thanks tonight for all this support from everybody involved. The small SST team remain the finest colleagues and the greatest collaborators of all. Stacey Allen, who manages all our work with young people and who you'll be meeting later, and Rosie Eyre, who manages the Stephen Spender Prize. Rosie won't appear on screen tonight, but she's present in absolutely everything that you'll see here. When we decided to do this more expansive event, we basically passed that as a challenge onto Rosie, and as ever, she's risen to it beautifully. Thanks also to Jennifer Moulds, who's been keeping you all informed about our work via social media, and to Edith Matthewson for creating all the videos that you'll see tonight, all bar one, I should say. These are monumental efforts that all happen quietly behind the scenes, but they make this event what it is. One of the areas that Rosie has also been working on is our poetry bank. Having said earlier that all you need is a poem to engage in the prize, we are aware that this is not equally accessible, especially for young people. Some will have grown up with poetry books on the shelves at home. Some will have teachers who've been sharing their own love of poetry with them from a young age. But with our work, we above all want to reach those for whom this access isn't a given. And this is where our school workshops and our poem bank come in. We aim ultimately to offer open access poems on our website in at least the number of languages regularly represented in the prize. And today we have poems in over 50 languages. Many of these have been donated by poets who are keen to encourage young people across the UK to read and enjoy more international poetry. Over 50 languages sounds pretty good, and we're pleased with that, but it's not yet enough. Almost 100 languages were represented in entries to the prize this year, and so we continue our work to expand that bank. Alongside the roughly 1,500 youth entries to the prize, we know that lots more young people translate poetry with their teachers using the resources that we provide. So this year we can say with confidence that several thousand young people have been reading, discussing and translating poetry from over 70 languages in their classrooms. Not everyone can be a winner, and we wish that we could include more of these wonderful translators of all ages in this event. We do commend a very large number of entrants every year, and all their names are on our website and will be shown on screen at the end of today's event, so do keep watching for that. There are 23 languages amongst the winning and highly commended poems tonight, and well over 70 amongst our commendees. The languages range from those learnt in our schools to those spoken in homes and playgrounds across the UK. There is space for both in the Stephen Spender Trust. Neither is privileged over the other. We're truly grateful to all the entrants for bringing these languages and poems into our orbit. For me, the Stephen Spender Prize is about inclusion and opening outwards. It shows a different version of the UK from the one that we increasingly see, and we're really glad that you're all part of that this evening. Automatic captioning is available throughout the event, but you can switch it on and off as you wish. All the videos that you'll be seeing tonight will be subtitled, and we're absolutely delighted to be joined by Steve, who will be providing BSL interpreting throughout the live sections. Thank you very much, Steve. I know that the audience tonight includes many of the freelance practitioners we work with who deliver workshops to young people and design resources, as well as our brilliant trustees. Thank you to all for everything that you do to support our work and enable us to reach increasing numbers. It's been a great pleasure this year too to work with our 4 judges for the prize, Taher Adel, Jennifer Wong, Keith Jarrett, and Enora Lessinger, all of whom are here tonight, and you'll be meeting them soon. So, without further ado, let's move on to hearing a little bit about what we call the Open Prize, which is our prize for everybody aged 19 and over. The prize is now for anybody from anywhere in the world, translating any poem from any language into any English. And we had really great geographical diversity this year. 3 continents and 6 countries were represented amongst the 9 winners, highly commended entrants and first-time entrants. And we had entries from 6 continents and 38 countries overall. It was, as always, a great pleasure to meet with the judges for the meeting where we made the final decisions and to look through their short lists of poems and translators from across the world. So I'm very pleased to introduce our judges for the open category now, Taher Adel and Jennifer Wong. Taher, hi Taher, is a British Bahraini poet and spoken word artist. I first met or encountered Taher on Radio 4, BBC Radio 4, listening to him talk about the importance of languages and translation for his own writing and multilingual practice, and thought I couldn't imagine anybody who's better suited to support our work at the Stephen Spender Trust. So really thrilled, Taher, that you joined us a second time to judge this year. I'm also particularly thrilled that when we met at the judges meeting, you told us about some workshops that you'd been delivering on creative writing and poetry translation near to where you live and how you'd linked them to the Stephen Spender Prize. From our perspective, this is completely ideal. It shows the prize as creating a platform for new opportunities for young people. Can you tell us a little bit about how that all worked?
So firstly, it's an absolute privilege to judge for a second year. I've said this before, how it's informed my poetry practice, the type of poetry I write and read now has changed. But to answer the question about how I've incorporated it in a workshop setting, so I've done a few workshops titled I Don't Know What Language I Dream In around the local area in Luton with secondary schools. So originally it was just to explore how language is formed and also how poetry engages with different languages. But then I thought, why not include poetry translation entirely? So I used a lot of the resources that we had in the Stephen Spender website, and then I just encourage the children and the class teachers to engage with it. Eventually, what I saw was what I would have liked to see growing up, speaking Arabic at home, reading all this Arabic poetry at home. That was never brought into the classroom, and now pupils were going in, taking poetry from home, bringing it into the classroom, translating it, and engaging with both languages in a completely different way, and seeing nuances in either language that they wouldn't have been privy to. So it was an absolute delight and privilege to see that side of it being worked, and I'll continue to do that hopefully in the foreseeable future.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Tahir. And that's exactly what we hear from teachers and writers going into schools across the UK. And it always strikes us that it's not a big change, you don't have to make a big change to make that change for those young people, to enable them, as you say, to bring these languages in from home, bring them into the classroom, and give them the opportunity to be creative with them. So it's really great to hear that example. I'm going to ask Tahir to tell us a little bit about some of the entries, or rather about one entry that made a particular impression on you from the open category tonight, Tahir.
There was a few entries, and it was really difficult to select. The judging process was quite difficult this year, going through. But if I had to pick one, it would be Exam, by, and I might butcher this, Lishok Ni Khushkalpa. And it was a poem translated from Irish by Ellen Corbett. What stood out wasn't just type of translation, the craftsmanship behind the translation itself, the word selection. It was also the deliberation. And I was reading the commentary and going through the commentary, and we tend to do that when going through the judging process. And she described it in a way that I've never seen it being described before. She goes, for the first time, the act of translation did not feel like a game of telephone, but rather as though my own life was bleeding into the work. And I think that perfectly describes it. And as a poet, I've worked with translators who've translated my poetry into different languages, and I've always wanted a translator to let a poem kind of speak to them before they begin that translation process, until they become inseparable from the poet themselves. So that was quite unique, and I thought the translation of it, and the poem itself was terrific as well, but the translation was impeccable. And that was the standout poem for me. And there's a few other standout poems as well, which we will hopefully discuss a later point today.
We'll be hearing some of them shortly. And thanks also for referring to the commentaries. So for those of you that are new to the Stephen Spender Prize, everybody in the open category also writes a commentary on some of the information about how they made their translation choices and so on. And those are all published on our website along with the original poems and the translations. So do take a look. We're joined also by Jennifer Wong, who is a poet and creative writing lecturer originally from Hong Kong, now based in the UK. Welcome, Jenny. Thank you for joining us. Jenny, you recently published a pamphlet called Time Difference. And when I was reading about this, I came across this lovely quote from somebody writing about the pamphlet. They said, living in the liminal space between time differences, here is a poet's world of emotions as she navigates an unfamiliar landscape of in-betweenness and otherness, from her writing desk to a walk around the most mesmerizing lake in Beijing, where words are always out of reach. So when I read that, that idea of in-betweenness really struck me as going to the heart of what's happening with translation, of living and working between languages. Jenny, could we hear from you about an entry that made a particular impression on you from the open category?
Yes, sure. I think what strikes me as really interesting is Brandon Toe's translation of Li Chengjiao, which is like a very refreshing translation called Sheer Mist and Rolling Clouds Read This Eternal Day. And basically, although this is a very classic classical poem, what the translator has done is to make use of new ways of lineating the poem and to use minimalistic language to capture the memories of that speaker, the present and the misty future, the sense of longing, nostalgia, and making it really very refreshing to read again, using imageries like incense. The incense is wilting inside my beast-shaped censer. So I think like the preciseness of all these imageries, it's really very well crafted.
Thank you, Jenny. So we're now going to watch a video where we hear and see some of the winners and commendees from the open category, including those that Jenny and Taher have spoken about. So I hope you enjoy this video.
My name is Midori Takahashi. I translate the sequence of tanka poems from Japanese.
My name is Marina Sofia, and I translated a poem from Romanian.
My name is Tila Varghese, and I translated a poem from Tamil.
The most challenging part of the translation was how to convey tanka's unique rhythm and musicality, as well as the writer's reserved, quiet tone.
It is a poem about lung disease, and I really liked the way the f and sounds in the original imitate a collapsed lung, so I tried to render that in the translation as well.
I was drawn to the poem for the vivid portrayal of a nomadic family's day-to-day struggles for survival.
My name is Martin Crucifix, and I've translated this poem from the German.
My name is Rhiannon Lawrence, and I translated a poem extract from Akkadian French.
I am Piera Chan, and I translated a poem from Cantonese.
Technically, the poem is just one sentence, so it's impossible to tell whether what is observed are contemporaneous or from quite different eras.
I wanted to translate this poem because I feel it is meant to be read aloud in the oral tradition of epic poetry. So in my translation, I've tried to retain the shape of the original, as well as its musicality, colour, playfulness, and at times breathless pace.
I really like this poem because the speaker talks about going out for a walk to take their mind off things, and the lines mimic the rhythm of that walking and do it so well that the reader actually feels soothed through the sheer act of reading.
My name is Aleksandra Żółczyńska, and I translated a poem from Polish. I chose to translate this poem because I was captivated by its powerful imagery of displacement and war. Are they mine? Hips, back and lips, chewed up fists, body switched to waiting. A basket pushed into the rush as sways and returns. A man stands on the shore, his eye on the basket's tether. A bottle of vodka by the bed to drown the fear of sinking.
Hi, my name is Brendan To, and I translated a poem from Chinese. The poet Li Qingzhao wrote this poem to her husband, whom she hadn't seen in over a year, and legend has it that upon receiving the poem, her husband spent 3 days and nights trying to write a poem that could convey a similar sense of intense longing in response, but failed to do so. Sheer mist and rolling clouds fret this eternal day. Some incense is wilting inside my beast-shaped censer. It is the 9th day of the 9th month, Chongyang Festival.
My name is Ellen Corbett, and I translated a poem from Irish. It was quite difficult. It's quite a sensitive topic, but I was able to use my own experiences and my own skills as a translator and as a researcher to help me, and I really, really enjoyed the translation process. Exam by Leisha Nikishla. Like any good archaeologist worth her salt, rummaging around in some cave or passage tomb, my nurse dons a mask and headlamp. And it's only now that I remember the tufts I didn't trim, sprouting copper under the spotlight, like filigree across my skin, or like the chiselled triskellies on the entrance stone at Newgrange. She adjusts me with a lever, peers in through the aperture to the chamber, this dark part that I won't ever get to see. But after this winter solstice, I'm as white as the paper she draped me in. Beads of sweat gild my forehead. Nausea rises from the pit in my stomach. I curl up on the table, sun-scorched, and plead for the darkness to return, and for that cool shroud of ignorance to be replaced. Please, cover me up with moss, put back the dust and debris, and let me go unexamined again.
Congratulations to everybody who has won and been commended in the open category, and thank you so much for those readings and reflections on the poem. That's on the translations. That's always a real highlight. Most of this evening is about celebrating translators, but translation is of course always a collaboration, that word again, with the original text and the writer. And sometimes that collaboration can be a real dynamic, shared experience. One of the great things about the prize is that it gives living poets the opportunity to see their works translated into English, often for the first time. The prize also brings attention to works of poetry that might not otherwise reach mainstream attention in English, and it nurtures collaborations between poets and translators. This process was encapsulated by this year's first prize winner, who we've just heard from, Ellen Corbett. And in the following video, we're going to hear from the Irish poet whose poem inspired her winning translation.
Hi, Chairde. My name is Lísio Ní Chustide. I'm a poet from Ireland and I primarily write in the Irish language. It's very interesting in a certain sense to have your work translated back into your own native language. Irish is my second language. It's almost kind of like a revelation in the sense like the poem has a second life that in some ways resonates even more with your own life. It was a real privilege as well to have the poem translated by one of my very good friends, Ellen Corbett. We're both from the same part of Ireland as well, in Ulster, so it's fantastic to have that geographical and linguistic connection. I hope it's a signifier for our ongoing work together with Irish language and English translation. Gurmila Maigi.
Thank you so much. I love that idea of the poem having a second life, and also it kind of relates to that idea that when you speak another language, you have another self and another way of being. And that's one of the really wonderful, liberating aspects of translation. So we're now moving on to the youth categories of the Stephen Spender Prize. We decided last year to make a change to how the youth prizes run, and to, as well as having a prize for school entries, which we'll come to, also to have an individual youth category, which is what we're going to look at now. We think about this individual youth category kind of like a mirror of the adult prize. So almost like an apprenticeship for a future of reading, sharing and translating poetry. And we hope that everybody we see on screen tonight and everybody who entered the prize will continue with this life of reading, sharing and translating poetry. So this was down to Jenny and Tahir again, the very difficult task of selecting winners from the individual youth entries. And I'd like to hear from both of you just a little bit about the experience of judging it, and perhaps one entry that left a particular impression on you. Tahir.
Yeah, sure. This year compared to previous year, what I was there wasn't any tangible disparity between the quality and the open prize 15 to 18, which was an absolute shock to me, because some of the entrants were remarkable, but I couldn't quite believe that they were under 18. It was interesting, and there was one that stood out, and that was the German poem Apertures of Light by Martin A. Bolker, which was translated by a translator named Catherine Chan, who not only submitted a German poem, but I think it was a few other entrants, one of which was French. And the consistency across more than one entry was remarkable. There was a real sensitivity to the phonetic nature of the poems and the musicality found in the originals, and she brought that to life with her word choices, a selection, and even I've mentioned this before. The commentary normally indicates how well versed somebody is when it comes to translation and understanding the original poem, and she showed expert nature of being able to translate not just the work but also understand how the process itself works, and that astonished me. That poem and the way it was translated did impress us judges. So yeah, no, that was my one poem that stood out.
Thank you, Taher. So perhaps they don't need an apprenticeship. These are youth translators, they're already there. Yeah. Thank you. Jenny, could we hear from you about perhaps one entry that you'd particularly like to highlight?
Yes, yeah, sure. So I thought I'm really struck by the Joanna Jones's translation of the Argentinian poet, the poem Misery. I think the young translator was very capable and confident in paying attention to the research process, getting down to really capturing the meaning and feeling of the speaker, that sense of rejection and depression conveyed through really simple but very poignant and candid vocabulary, and the use of imageries to walk on the edge far from the ocean, which the gold sand and the green waters and pure sky see me pass. So I thought that sense of lyricality, it's really very beautifully done.
Thank you, Jenny. So hopefully that's whets your appetite to hear from some of our winning translators in the youth category. We're going to now watch a video of those winners.
My name is Malena, and I translated a poem from Spanish.
Hello, my name is Lilihan, and I translated a poem from Korean.
The Fruited Orange Tree is a poem that sounds like a painting. I don't only love what it says, but the way it is said.
The most interesting part of the poem is that poet compares the life of a human being to that of a flower. His flower is not an ordinary flower, which is often described as weak and fragile. His is strong and fierce.
The pepper tree's green laughter was freezing the ground. The earth was tightening into dark clods like a difficult birth. But the small orange tree was standing silent and tight, hope-fruited, in the midst of disaster.
Is there a flower that blossoms without fluttering? There isn't a beautiful flower that doesn't flutter while blossoming. Even if the flower was fluttering, the stem was set up right. Where is the love that goes on without fluttering?
My name is Catherine and I translated a poem from German.
Hello, my name is Taeyeon and I translated a poem from Korean.
Hi, my name is Joanna and I translated a poem from Spanish.
The prevalence of unique compound nouns was challenging to translate artistically. The title, for example, I translated as Apertures of Light instead of the literal light openings.
I chose this poem because it resonates with the Korean history, which was the day that Korea got freed from Japan by the fluttering flag.
I really like this poem because of the way the poet uses really strong descriptions of nature to cover the hidden message of pain and rejection, which was only visible to me after translating.
Droplets which have fled the stream reveal everything that they are not, but want to be, in the rays that have never leapt onto things, but instead flicker and flit away, mirrored in time's revolutions.
This is it, a silent hysteria, a handkerchief of eternal nostalgia. Flourish towards the mundane, perpetual seaplane.
I like to be tall, proud, perfect, like a Roman soldier, to be in tune with the mighty waves and the dead rocks and the wide beaches that circle the sea.
Congratulations to everybody commended and winning in those categories, and thank you so much for those amazing videos. They speak for themselves. I think we can all see incredible things happening there. And thank you so much to Jenny and Taher for all of their hard work judging and for sharing some of their thoughts with us this evening. So we're staying with our youth categories now, but moving on to our school's Laureate Prize, which is a prize that we started only last year. This is a dedicated prize for schools, so all the poem translators are submitted by teachers on behalf of their students. This was the result of lots of conversations with teachers about the prize, and the fact that we'd noticed increasing numbers of teachers submitting on behalf of their students and wanting to be able to support more of them to do so. This year, so the second year of the school's laureate, saw dozens of schools and other settings ranging from primary to sixth form submitting poems. In order to make this possible, we asked teachers to submit a maximum of 5 poems for every age category. And as I said at the beginning, we know, therefore, that there are thousands more young people taking part in prize activities and internal competitions in their schools. I'm very pleased that for the second year running, the poet Keith Jarrett has joined as judge for the Schools Laureate Prize. Keith is perfect for this judging panel because he's not only a stellar poet, but he's also a linguist. Keith studied Spanish at university, and he's lived and worked in Spanish-speaking countries, and he really lives his languages through bilingual performances. I highly recommend that after the event this evening, you go on YouTube and have a look at some of those performances. I can't think of a more inspiring role model for the young linguists who take part in our programs. And so, Keith, we're so pleased that you're with us again this year and that you took on the role of judging this category. Could we start by hearing from you what you were looking for when you were judging? What sort of things made a poem translation jump out and hold your attention?
It's always hard at the beginning, so I just decided just to read through everything and see what struck me, what moved me, and then to go from there and then think about why. And I think a lot of the why is poem choice, for one, and also finding a language that feels like it's the only possible version. And what was really great about that was there were a few poems where there were a few occasions where the poets had chosen the same poem and completely different translations, and I thought, yes, of course, that's the only possible way that you could translate it. So that was fun, but then it just became really difficult to then have to, judge the merits, what's going to be better. And I think it was just really seeing how well they'd considered like attention to the language, so it feels natural, it feels alive, and it's breathing, and then looking at it side by side with the original, that they've taken into account things like the form or rhyme if it rhymes, and all of those things, so it feels like, yeah, this is the only possible version in English.
Thank you. Yeah. So there's this kind of conviction that comes through as like commitment to the original and to the relationship in between that and the translation. Could we hear then, Keith, a few entries that made a particular impression on you, and then we will be hearing directly from the translators themselves.
This was hard because, again, there were so many different reasons, but I'd say for Key Stage 1, so these are, Key Stage 1 to 2, and I always forget the ages, but these are like 7 to 10, I think, counting, and the poet was Amelia, and what I really loved about it was the element of fun, which really came across, and it starts, 7 necks, 7 heads, 7 mouths. It's quite simple, but then you can see through the commentary, which is really important, just how she'd really thought about word choice, and there were places where it didn't quite make sense, so she like deliberated, tried different versions. So that was my choice Key Stage 1 and 2. Key Stage 3, there was Sam who translated a poem from German, Hoppy Hoppy Rider, simply because the accompanying element that he used was a video where he sang his translation, and I couldn't get that song out of my head. So thank you for that. That literally stayed with me, and this happened a couple of times with the accompaniment, as well as commentary. Some of the young translators decided that they were going to do their own responses to it, and that was really powerful to see that they were passionate about these poems. Key Stage 4, Emre, who translated from Turkish, and the poem begins, "The decree is the Sultan's, the mountain is ours." And there was something really concise about the poem. Again, it felt like you have chosen the right words that really fit. But then also the poet described like their deliberation in finding the right meaning. Certain words didn't perhaps make sense in contemporary Turkish. And so really just like struggling to find a way to bring it across into English. And then finally, Key Stage 5, Anna, translated from Romanian, and it was the Rondel of the Dying Roses. And there was just a confidence in it, and in using a really seemingly simple form of the rondel, and how to then translate that into English, what rhyme scheme to use, playing around with the word order so that it fits, but then also feels natural. And I think she did a brilliant job with that. So all of those stuck out, but I could have chosen so many more as well.
Thank you. And yeah, so clear from hearing you speak what a complex act this translation is. It is so impressive that what the young people that we're hearing from this evening, and so many others that we can't hear from this evening, are doing when they're translating. Yeah, so it's really great to hear that detail. We're now going to watch a video where we hear from some of the winners and commendees from this category.
Hi, my name is Amelia, and I translated this poem from Polish language.
Hi, my name is Isis. I translated this song from Spanish to English.
My name is Manera Tija, and I translated a poem from Spanish.
I chose to translate this poem because to me it really stood out and was quite unique. I just really liked the way it sounded and looked, and the story behind it was inspiring as well.
I really like this song because it remembers me to my childhood, because me and my mom used to really sing this song. I can cry with this song, I can laugh with this song, I can be angry with this song, everything.
I really like this poem because of the vocabulary used. The words create a picture in my mind.
Counting by Anna Podchasha. 7 high mountains and 7 gloomy forests, 7 clear rivers in 7 times.
Me Voy by Julieta Venegas. Because you didn't know how to understand my heart. What was in it, because you didn't have the courage to see who I am.
This poem is called Pegasus by Antonio Machado. Pegasus, beautiful Pegasus, little wooden horses. I knew as a child the joy of spinning.
My name is Maria Sabizor, and I translated the poem from Persian.
My name is Sam, and I translated a poem from German to English.
I chose to translate this poem because it carries a powerful message about the longing for peace and the horrors of war in my home country, Afghanistan.
The most difficult part of this translation was keeping the rhythm, rhymes and syllables in the same places as the original.
Our sad life. In the embrace of the soil, no flowers bloom. garden and orchards on the brink of doom.
Hoppy, hoppy rider, hoppy, hoppy rider. When he falls, he cries, and he falls into a dump. The ravens make him lunch. He falls into a swamp. The rider then goes bump.
My name is Anna Marabian, and I translated a poem from Armenian. I chose to translate this poem because it highlights the hardships which people had to endure through due to the Armenian genocide. Found by Hovannes Shiraz. Bitter memories of my childhood, and I am an orphan among you. But behold, one deep night, I escaped from the orphanage.
My name is Emily, and I translated a poem from French.
My name is Varvara Verbitska, and I translated a poem from Ukrainian.
I chose this poem because I enjoyed how it tackles the negative stereotypes of animals, such as corvids, by incorporating them as the main subjects in something as beautiful as poetry.
I really like this poem because it not only holds an important message about being respectful to other people, but also speaks about how unique you are.
Crows by Gigafets. You who make the sky whiter than sorrow and the downcast eyes of a cheerful audience. O my crows of pitch and of plumage, of what flesh do you speak?
I, by Vasil Simonenko. There may be many like me in the world, but I, for God's sake, am unique. We are not a set of standard selves, but countless different universes.
Congratulations to everybody who won and was commended in those categories, and thank you so much for those absolutely outstanding performances in those videos. You'll be able to read the full translations and see the commentaries on the website, the Stephen Spender Trust website, whenever you choose. So I talked about the Schools Laureate Prize being working through partnership with teachers. We've long been aware of the central role that teachers play in creating opportunities like the Stephen Spender Prize for their pupils. And we've been working in recent years to recognise and support this work. So one of the things that we now do is we commend teachers for outstanding commitment to the prize. So those teachers who've engaged large numbers of their pupils in the activity of creative translation in their classes. But we also recognise that this isn't a one-way street, that teachers also enjoy the opportunity to be creative and may not have that opportunity so much, especially not in the daily life at school. So last year we introduced a strand of the prize that's open to all teachers at schools that have entered pupils, for teachers to be the translators and to contribute translations of poems of their choosing. We feel it's important too for teachers to model creativity to their pupils, to show that engaging in literature and translation in this way is something that doesn't stop when you leave school, but ideally your experiences at school are just the beginning of that creative journey. So I'm very, very pleased first to announce the winners of these awards. So our outstanding teacher commendees are Laura Holloran from the University of Birmingham School, and that's a name to remember because it will be coming back later. Adina Hagatan and colleagues from Comberton Village College, Helen Williams and Claire Post from William Patton Primary School. Then we have our Teacher Laureate Prize winners. So these are the teachers who translated poems that our judges selected. The winner is Karine Di Francesco from St. Flannan's College. Highly commended are Elena Bossi from Dixon's Sixth Form Academy, Laura Elena Suna from the Nicolae Iorga Romanian School in Birmingham, and Celia Ortiz Garcia from North London Collegiate School. And a special commendation goes to Shona Turner from Queen Elizabeth School. We're now going to have the opportunity to hear from these commended teachers and teacher translated themselves in videos that they've recorded for us. Thank you very much to all the teachers who've submitted entries to this year's prize, and we look forward to this video.
I'm Laura Holleran. I'm subject leader for languages at the University of Birmingham School. I first heard about the work that the Stephen Spender Trust do when they delivered a series of translation workshops. Their strategy encouraged pupils to first translate a poem very, very literally, and then from this, pupils produce what they called a polished translation. This led to some really interesting discussions about English syntax and poetic license, and I decided to adapt the resources. Colleagues then did the same, so that every child in years 7 to 10 produced an English translation of a French poem. I then encouraged our pupils and students to, in their own time, improve their translations and write a commentary. I myself enjoyed the class discussions about poetry and translation itself and found the lessons to be a very engaging way of broadening our curriculum, but also teaching strategies for an important language learning skill. I'm really, really proud of those students for engaging with the work in translation and really giving it a go.
My name is Corinne Di Francesco and I have translated a poem from French.
My name is Elena Bossi and I translated a poem from Italian.
Although the original poem was written in rhyme, I chose not to retain that form, to allow the translation to flow more naturally and reinforce the sense of movement as the poet undertakes his journey.
I chose to translate this poem because it's about the Alps, a place that I go to very often and I like very much.
Tomorrow at the break of dawn, Victor Hugo. I will walk deep in thoughts without seeing what is around me, without hearing any sounds, alone, nameless, head down, hands clasped together, sad, and in my mind, the day will be no different than the night.
Examples by Antonia Pozzi. When the entire valley turns into a vast purple lake and the bell chimes emerge there like white resonant water lilies, alone, high up, she stretches towards the sun for a silent talk.
So, basically, there's been yapping of the spear Danes in the olden days, the high-key riz of kings and how extra the princes were. With gangs of lads, the lane shield shifling would often flex the big win over many basic lads who were cooked. Womp womp.
Thank you so much. What a resounding end to that video from teachers. And I really liked what Laura said at the beginning as well about being proud of the pupils for having a go. I feel like having a go is a really good motto for what we want to happen in the classrooms that we're working with, and we know that that the way that our projects are designed means that lots of young people who don't otherwise have a go in creative activities are doing so, and we really love seeing that happening. So we're staying with teachers now. I've talked already about the absolutely central role that teachers play in every aspect of the prize for young people, and those wonderful videos that you watched of these schools laureate prizes. They were all made possible by the teachers working with their pupils on those poems that then went on to win the prize. But the role of teachers extends beyond the prize into pretty much every aspect of our work at Stephen Spender Trust, and we're increasingly working with to support teachers to increase their creative translation activity that they're doing with young people. So I'm delighted to be joined by Stacey Allen, who manages all of our education programs at the Trust, to hear a little bit more about how we're working with teachers and what our plans are for the future. Welcome, Stacey. Thank you so much for joining. We've been working together at Stephen Spender Trust since 2020, and in that time, we've worked increasingly closely with teachers. Could you tell us a little bit about how those partnerships with teachers have developed during that time?
Yeah, thank you, Charlotte. I think what we've seen this evening is how we're really, we recognise the contributions that teachers make, and helping them become part of our celebration event is something that we've moved towards in the last couple of years. But we also understand that there is significant potential for us to work even more closely with teachers by sharing our approach to creative translation with them. And this, we hope, will help their pupils, their students, have access to the benefits of creative translation on an ongoing basis. Teachers have long been part of our programs. They've always played a central role in our programs. And teachers even attended our very first professional development program, Translators in Schools, which ran from 2013 to 2015. And so we've always had a really good relationship with teachers. It's funny to note that actually some of the translators at that who attended that professional development program even went on to become teachers themselves. So since 2020, we've offered webinars in creative translation. We've offered these both for subject associations, mainly within modern languages, but also English. But we've also ran our own, and we ran two series of webinars in spring 2021 and spring 2022. And these had the goal of introducing teachers to creative translation, and moving towards integrating these creative translation practices into their own classrooms, into their teaching practices. And this is something we're currently trying to build on.
Thank you. Yeah, so I really like what you say about sharing our approach with teachers. I think that's really central to what we're trying to do. It's always very collaborative, and I feel like this work with teachers has developed quite organically through the conversations that we've had with them over the years, as we've been working with various schools. So what's next for this work with teachers?
So we're currently drawing up and testing out a new professional development offering for teachers, which we envisage will have three main strands. Those strands will be of different lengths, and we'll be sharing to a greater extent our practices in the kind of longer forms. And so these three types of professional development will be available from spring 2025 onwards. If we can talk about one of these strands in particular, this year we've been running a project with the National Centre for Writing in Norwich called Young Creative Translators. This is a 3-year project. And through this project, it has really allowed us to develop one of these strands. In a minute, we will hear a testimonial from Michael Bidder, who was a Year 4 teacher that was part of the first year of that programme. So you hear more about the programme from him. But to share some details of what the professional development looked like, and you'll see from it the significant role that teachers play within this programme. So the project starts with a full day of professional development for teachers, where we share with teachers our creative translation approaches, but also a set of resources that they will then go on to deliver in school. So we provide 6 resources or 6 activities that have been developed by one of our translators, and the teachers then deliver those activities on a schedule that suits them. So it could be the 6 activities over 6 weeks, or it could be in a condensed schedule. And during that delivery period, they do get support from our translator trainer. So it's a really empowering way of sharing our practice with teachers, which allows them to learn more about what we do and then put it into practice in the classroom.
Thank you. So we're going to hear now from Michael Bidder, a primary school teacher in Norfolk, who took part in this first iteration of our partnership with National Centre for Writing, and hear about his experience of working with us and then delivering directly to his pupils.
My class took part in the Young Creative Translators last year. Our children were in a Year 3 class, which is 7 to 8 year olds. The project was a resounding success. Here are some of the quotes from the children. I like learning about the Amazon in a really interesting way that seemed like we weren't working. I could use my language in it. I can't often do this at school. I could do it all. And this is from a child that often really struggles. I've never been a translator before. I would like to be one. The children were really into the environment, so the Amazon was something that they were really interested in and wanted to know more about. This meant that our next geography unit was linked to this, so it helped us in that way. Although we're in a rural location, we have a large number of children with English as an additional language. And where the project was designed, it gave them an opportunity to share their home language, which they thoroughly enjoyed. The children with special needs seemed on much more of an equal footing than they often were before, and the majority could access it without a great deal of help. It also gave them confidence, and this confidence grew as the project progressed. The project was also an excellent way to give children who didn't often seem to have much of a voice to share their feelings and become a bit more vocal. The children thoroughly enjoyed the project. Every single one of them said they got a lot out of it and would love to do something similar again.
Thank you so much, Michael, and to all of your colleagues and your wonderful pupils at the Nelson Academy in Norfolk. That is just the most wonderful list of benefits and experiences that you've shared with us there, and I think really gives Stacey and myself lots of energy to continue this work. So that's a really good example of one of our partnerships, both with an arts organisation, so with National Centre for Writing, which is based in Norwich, and also with a school, and is the kind of work that we're going to be doing lots more of in the years to come. Universities have also become really important partners for us in recent years. We're doing lots of work connecting research projects to the world beyond the university by using our model to bring that research into schools. And Stacey, we're going to talk now about one particular project recently that we've been working on with the University of Birmingham. Could you tell us how that came about?
Yeah, so this is a really exciting development in our work. So it allows us to apply our creative translation model to lots of different projects and to support researchers to bring their research to new audiences. So Dr. Emma Wagstaff, who is Associate Professor of French at the University of Birmingham, reached out to us to develop a project. Dr. Wagstaff is a specialist in studying French literature and the visual arts and the interactions between them. So we wanted to develop a project that had a number of different elements, but at its heart opened up conversations and connections between literature and the visual arts. The project had 3 interconnected strands. It began with a series of workshops at the University of Birmingham School, which Laura Holleran talked about in her video just before. Then we had the curation of a booklet of poetry, and finally the creation of resources for folk poems in that booklet.
So this is a really good example of how we've tended to collaborate with researchers. How did it work in practice?
So I think throughout the project, there was a real emphasis on collaboration between us and Dr. Wagstaff. And it was a real opportunity for Dr. Wagstaff to share her research interest and for us to share our expertise in public engagement, in communicating quite complex ideas to young people, in engaging young people in active translation without necessarily having pre-existing language skills. So before the workshops happened, Dr. Wagstaff proposed various different poems. We looked through them, we responded to the suggestions, myself, Rosie, and you as well, Charlotte. We looked at the poems and looked at ones we thought might work well with the pupils. For the resources, Dr. Wagstaff also proposed different works of art, and we worked again in collaboration with one of our translator facilitators, Laura Bennett, who has a background in history of art. So it was really a team effort, and it meant that everyone brought something to the table, and I think the results, the outcomes of this project are really astounding. So the impact on the University of Birmingham School. So initially engaging around about 150 year 10 and year 12 pupils in workshops, and then having 450 pupils translating in class, led by Laura Holleran and her colleagues. And then, as we saw not too long ago, Laura Holleran being awarded being named one of our outstanding Stephen Sterner Prize teachers. So it's really, really positive and worked very, very well, we can say.
Yeah, and I love that that image of kind of starting with something quite small and then it gradually involves more and more young people. That's exactly the kind of thing that we want to see happening. This is the first time I think that we've developed extracurricular resources for literature and art. Obviously, we had some really nice examples earlier on of how music, with that amazing singing from those winners, of how music is very present in this activity, but visual literacy is really key, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is, and it was amazing to be able to expand what we do and to apply creative translation to questions of visual culture, but images and visuals have always been a core part of what we do and how we approach translation. We have a 3-step model, and it begins with a stage we call decode. And many of the activities that our translators do in the workshops, many of the activities that are part of our resources, use images at this decode stage, which provide ways into the text, the world of the text, without having seen the words. So it might be image boards, it might be looking at book covers, it might be putting the illustrations from a picture book in the correct order or in an unlikely order as well. And so one of the reasons why we do this is to really underscore the importance of context in translation, that as translators, we don't translate in a vacuum, but there is a real world relationship and a relationship to our experiences in that world. But also how translators, all types of translators, draw on visualization as a tool to support our work. And this might be, translators translating product descriptions and looking at a product and looking at the image of that product to help with them to translate a text. Or it might be imagining the world, looking at pictures of or images of where something is taking place. So it really highlights that real world connection and the importance of context to translation.
Thank you so much, Stacey. I felt we could talk all evening, but we should probably draw this to a close at this point. Perhaps just to finish by reflecting on something that we think a lot and talk a lot about at SST, which is this idea that young learners are not always seeing how rich and varied it is to be a linguist, that it can be so much about engaging in culture and activating your creativity. And that's, of course, what modern languages degrees are. And we do hope that all the young people in this room are aware of that and are thinking about where their languages might take them in the future, because they can take you all to wonderful, wonderful places. Thank you so much, Stacey. And if anybody would like to find out more about what Stacey's been talking about, then do go to our website and you'll be able to contact us from there. So we heard from Mike Bidder talking about a course that he ran in partnership with us at his primary school in Norfolk. As you may have gathered through all of those mentions of the Amazon, it was a Brazilian Portuguese, had a Brazilian Portuguese focus. And Portuguese is also the focus of our latest Spotlight, which we turn to now. So a few years ago, we introduced this Spotlight strand to the prize, focusing on a language that's spoken widely in the UK. Last year, we decided that the focus for this school year would be Portuguese, to recognise the great rise in the numbers of Portuguese speakers across the UK, especially in our schools, and the way that they enrich UK culture and society. This Portuguese Spotlight was made possible through collaboration with Honora Lessinger, who you're about to meet. Enora is a senior lecturer in modern languages and translation at Oxford Brookes University, and she is the very definition of a polyglot. Enora now has advanced proficiency in 8 languages and is a practicing freelance translator working between French, Spanish, Portuguese, Hebrew, and English. We talk a lot at SST about future possible selves and the importance of role models for young people, but how rarely those role models are multilingual or foreground their multilingualism. They're basically, many of them are here in this Zoom room tonight. Enora represents a perfect example of that multilingual modelling, and we're thrilled to have worked with her for the first time this year. Enora also helped us to curate the booklet of Portuguese language poems, The Entrance to the Prize Translated. And many of these poems were donated by their poets, and we send our thanks to them wherever they are too. So Enora, can you tell us what it was like to judge the Stephen Spender Prize for the first time this year?
Hi, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. It was an absolute pleasure to be able to take part in the judging process. I'd never done anything like this before, so I wasn't sure what to expect. I have years of experience teaching translation in a university context, but I'd never worked with schools before, and it's a very different kind of exercise. And I found it really inspiring, both as a professional translator, but also as a translation teacher. And one thing that I was particularly thrilled about was that the format where the translators produce a translation and a piece to go with it. And I thought the freedom of the format of that piece really allowed for all sorts of different individual readings to be expressed in different ways. And I really thought we must take this on board in our teaching at Oxford Brookes, and I think we will. And I was really impressed actually by the quality of the entries and by how well the accompanying pieces or the commentaries or visual representations complemented these entries and allowed for very, very different interpretations. So one thing that was interesting is that one poem came back a lot. It was So is o Mar Português. And even though I read a lot of translations of that poem, I don't think that I read something that felt like a similar text twice. And I think that is largely due to the fact that they always had something to accompany them to explain the reading or express it through, for instance, a drawing. But also from the fact that no two translations are the same. There's no right or wrong answer in translation. There's not one possible translation of a text. And I think that really highlighted that for me, which I knew in theory, but that really made it very concrete, and that was really lovely.
That's fantastic, thank you. So that idea that there's more than one possible kind of reality with translation and kind of no such thing as an incorrect interpretation, or rather a real range of interpretations, which we know that young people and their teachers find so liberating. So Enora, I'm going to put you on the spot by asking you just to highlight one of the entries, and then we will move into the video of this year's Portuguese Spotlight winners and commendees. Thanks, Enora.
Right, this is difficult because there are quite a lot that were really striking to me, but I think it would make sense to talk about the one that has been staying with me and sort of haunting me, I think is the word. As much because of the visual representation that went with it as the translation itself, which is the translation of Pessoas Mar Português by Dennis Casey. I hope that is how you pronounce the name, in the KS45 category. And it's a poem about the sea and the hardship that can come from it. And in the visual representation, you can see someone who's in the water, and you can only see half of their face above the water, and have a very piercing stare. And you can see the reflection of this half head in the water in a really, really moving, beautiful, creative way. And I was really struck by how creative that drawing was and how expressive, and that was really reflected in the translation, which is a very individual reading out of it, very, very sensitive reading of it, and I thought it made a commendable effort to keep the rhyme nature of the poem. So I was really very impressed with that entry, and I have thought back on it many times since. And I think that's the sign of a great translation, if there is one.
Absolutely, yeah, thank you. And of course, there we have the interaction between the visual and the textual as well, which seems to be a theme that's emerging this evening. So let's have a look at the winners and commendees from this year's Portuguese Spotlight. Thank you so much, Honora.
Our names are Mayeli and
Sueli.
Hello, my name is Antonio and I have translated a poem from Portuguese.
Hello, my name is Aisha Quidit and I translated a Portuguese poem.
I liked how the poem describes all the sorrow through actions.
The hard bit was when you had to translate it and make it make sense.
I really like this poem because it's talking about the history of Portugal, how the men had to go to war, and their mums crying because they have passed away in the sea and the war.
I found the poem to be very thought-provoking because of the poet's reasons as to why she wanted to write the email, and so it gives an insight into the poet's mental state of mind. Oh, restless, merciless, salty sea, how much of your soul are tears of Portugal?
As we cross over you, many mothers weep, many children pray in vain, many brides were left unmarried, for you to be ours, O vast, desolate sea.
My name is Fatima and I translated a poem from Portuguese.
My name is Jake. My name is Taha. And my name is Sonos. We translated a poem from Portuguese into English.
I really liked this poem as it allowed me to reflect deeply on emotions. The use of you to directly speak to the heart allowed me to connect with the poet's intentions.
I chose to translate this poem because all the questions it asked. I really like this poem because it uses lots of repetition.
The most challenging part of the translation for me was the final line, and it didn't have a direct translation into English.
Heart Diseases by Carla Moreira. I clasp my heart gently. I carry it between my hands because I must be aware, recall the agonizing arrhythmias that trigger a glorious grip, sharp pain, short breaths. This tool of iron lies idle in my chest.
My name is Ivy Gillespie and this is my translation of Mar Português. O satirical sea, I wonder how much sorrow is held in your salty waters. For all the crossings, how many mothers have cried, how many sons have prayed, how many brides have stayed at home for you to belong to us, O sea.
My name is Dennis and I translated a poem from Portuguese. I really enjoyed translating this poem because it was fun to find a balance between keeping the original meaning of the poem but also keeping the rhyming structure of it. Portuguese Sea by Fernando Pessoa. How much of your salt, O salty sea, is the tears of Portugal's plea? By crossing ourselves, how many mothers sob, how many children cry out to God.
Thank you so much to everybody involved in the Portuguese Spotlight this year, to Honora for judging, and to those amazing young poet translators there. Hopefully you spotted Dennis's drawing on the back of the paper that they were holding there, a really wonderful example of this interaction between the visual and the textual that, as I say, seems to be really coming through tonight as a theme. So I promised you an expansive event this evening. There are 2 more short films that we want to share with you. These are both showcasing the work that we've done with schools this year. So the first is a film that shows the work that we did with 2 schools in the London Borough of Ealing this year, Ada Lovelace and Ellen Wilkinson schools. This was made possible with generous support from John Lyons charity. So the students took part in a series of creative translation sessions, focusing on translating 2 poems that were thematically linked but in different languages. There was one in Portuguese and another in French. So in the following video, we're going to hear from some of the teachers and translators who took part in that project. Thank you to everybody involved.
We took part in the Young Translators Award last year. Our Year 8 students really loved reading and engaging with French and Portuguese poetry and then using creativity to translate them. And you could tell they were really proud of their work at the end.
Over the course of the sessions, the students engaged in a variety of activities which encouraged creativity, problem solving, and using their linguistic skills.
So for 5 weeks, we did exercises that had them use all the languages they know. Then we used 2 poems to do a translation exercise, one in Portuguese and one in French.
Our students enjoyed using their existing knowledge of languages to be able to dissect the Portuguese language when they were doing their translation projects. And they saw that learning just one language can really make it easier to learn other languages in the future.
Despite having little or no prior knowledge of Portuguese, the students were able to apply cross-curricular transferable skills to infer meaning and listen for rhythm and repetition, as well as bring in their knowledge of other Romance languages to find cognates. Students then had to think about things like synonyms, register, and tone, all the while paying attention to the grammar of the original.
The fact that the translation workshop started with translating texts and poetry literally from the target language into English really drew the students' attention to the grammatical features of the text. This is going to have a really positive impact on those students who are preparing for the new GCSE specification, particularly for those translation tasks that place a greater focus on grammar, where students need that attention to detail on how those sentences are put together and how meaning is conveyed.
One of the highlights for me was seeing the way in which students were able to bring their home and community languages into the classroom and see yet another way in which these can be such a valuable asset.
They were really able to think about the nuances which exist between individual languages, as well as the similarities which can bring them together.
A lot of them were also adventurous and even decided to take, for example, the Portuguese, which they had never heard, probably never spoke, and write exclusively in Portuguese. And it worked out very well, and it was a fantastic experience.
Another fun moment was when we compared the students' efforts to machine translation, and the consensus was clear. Our Year 8s were much better translators and poets than AI.
There you go. That says it all, I think. Thank you so much to everybody involved in that video. You heard from teachers and translators who were involved in that project. And on our website, you'll also be able to see the zine that was created as part of that project, which is a really wonderful representation of all the creative work that happened in those workshops. And I really loved what came through in those videos is this relationship between the really detailed linguistic work. We've been talking about complexity this evening and attention to detail, at the same time as this really sort of giving of yourself in the experience, engaging with other cultures, bringing all aspects of yourself, for example, the languages that you might speak at home, bringing them into the classroom. That's one of the things that this kind of activity enables. So thank you so much to everybody involved in that. So we just heard about a project that brought Portuguese and French together, part of our Portuguese spotlight. Last year, many of you will remember that our spotlight focused on Ukrainian. And we ran a major program of workshops in schools right across the country called Celebrating Ukrainian Culture. We've been really pleased to be able to continue that work this year alongside our work with Portuguese, so that lots of young people have been sharing, reading, translating Ukrainian picture books and poems. We have one more video to share with you tonight, which shines a light on our Ukrainian project through the experience of staff and pupils at Quainton C of E Primary School. Which is a primary school in Buckinghamshire that we've worked with a lot, and we're really grateful for the fantastic collaboration that we've had from that school along with all the other schools represented this evening. So the pupils at Quainton took part in a special series of workshops led by our wonderful facilitator, Cheryl Moskovitz, as well as some undergraduate creative translation ambassadors from the Queen's College Translation Exchange, one of our partner organisations. I mentioned at the beginning that all the videos were produced by Edith Matthewson, bar one. This is the one. So many thanks to Steve Pearce for filming and producing this video. You'll also be able to access this from our website soon. But I hope you enjoy this final insight into the work that we've been doing this year. Thank you.
First time the children had their experience with Cheryl and her team was unbelievable, because the whole introduction to the Ukrainian language as a whole class unit was fab. Looking at how this would perhaps be written in a different way, in a different subject, I think that's been really powerful.
I'm coming in and I'm not from the Ukraine, I'm not a Ukrainian speaker, and yet together we're going to translate this text. Primarily, I've been working with a picture book called My Grandma by Tanya Stoos, and it's a beautiful story, so relatable to all ages. As soon as I produce the book, you can see their faces light up.
It was amazing to do the workshop today at this primary school, looking at a Ukrainian poem, because we were looking at translating orally as well, moving sounds to text, and yeah, so it opened up so many channels.
So the Ukrainian workshop that I joined today with the primary school was so rewarding, because it was so nice working with the children to see how they also engage with languages which they haven't seen before. And I love transposing meaning across languages, recreating the sense and kind of recreating that invigorating spark of the message of the original text and putting it in the new language.
It's beautiful text, and I enjoyed so much sourcing the text with the Ukrainian translator, Hannah Relive. I'm carrying this beautiful text that I love and finding ways into the world of that text.
It was about a grandma and her grandson.
And we actually looked at pictures of what the story might be like, and people leaving Ukraine and coming to Britain.
Today we were making it from Ukrainian to English.
You have to use your imagination, because you're thinking of what's happening and pretending you're there, and you're putting your own words into it, so you're basically writing it.
It helped everyone, because everyone was coming up to me what does that mean, what does that mean?
Varia has been absolutely immense in this, and I think has really enjoyed the opportunity to be a little teacher. The young lady I remember at the start of the year who wasn't very confident at all would maybe write 4 or 5 words in an English session. Through not just this project, but particularly this project, has gained a huge amount of confidence. We're looking as schools at building self-esteem as well as kind of knowledge and skills, and the self-esteem factor has been absolutely huge with this.
Being a parent of a Ukrainian child here in the local school, it's very important that a school really cares about Ukrainian children, about embracing and about paying attention to their origin, to their culture.
Speaking personally about the project and whether I would recommend it, I think, firsthand, it's shown to be not just beneficial massively towards the towards our Ukrainian children, but it's been so eye-opening to those children that have never been overseas, so they've not experienced a different culture and different language and texts. I would love to be part of another round of this project, and I wholeheartedly urge schools to do the same, and really hope that this project can increase in the opportunities it has to work with other schools.
Thank you to all of the pupils and staff at Quainton, and to Steve for making that film, and to our creative translation ambassadors, and to Cheryl Moskovitz for being involved in that. There's so much that I could draw on from that video. I think perhaps just to highlight the one of the pupils' comments about using your imagination and how you're basically writing it too, I think is what she said. And there's so much discussion in the world of translation about the relationship between translation and creative writing, and to what extent translation is a creative act. And I think everybody should just listen to what that pupil said. I think she just summed it up beautifully. So thank you so much to everybody who's taken part this evening, whether you've been visible on screen or not. I've said a few things as we've gone along about role models. I think this evening has been stuffed full of them, and we're really looking forward to being able to share the videos that you've been watching tonight, and also some of the conversations that we've been having this evening. Please do also share them with your friends, with your teachers, with your colleagues. Everything will be on our YouTube channel very soon. And do get in touch with us via our website if you'd like to find out more about anything that you've heard about this evening. Thank you to Steve for interpreting everything this evening. And I'm very pleased now to hand over to Jonathan Hayward, who's Chair of Trustees at the Stephen Spender Trust, for some final words. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you, everyone. As Charlotte said, I'm the co-chair of the Stephen Spender Trust. I know, and I share that honour with Rebecca Hart. I think everything tonight has been amazing, and if anyone, if you know friends or colleagues who weren't able to be here, do point them towards the YouTube channel, because the whole event will be posted online shortly. All the winning translations will be published online on the website. I'm seeing messages coming up in the chat, people saying thank you for the opportunity. I mean, really, I'm just here to say thank you. It's, Stephen Spender Trust exists to create a platform for these kinds of opportunities and to hear these kinds of translations. So we are very grateful to you. And all the full readings that we didn't have time for tonight, they will also all be available online as videos. Charlotte began the evening by thanking our donors and funders. I just want to reiterate how grateful we are to them for making all of our work possible. I'm particularly grateful this year to our judges, Taher, Jennifer, Keith, and Honora. I know that you give up a huge amount of time and energy, and I think it's fair to say love, to make the evening possible and to sort of share your passion for poetry. Our patrons, Daljit Nagra, became a patron of the Trust this year. We're very grateful for Daljit's support. The Stephen Spender Trust team, I'm only a trustee. I just swan in and say thank you at the end of events like this. They're made possible by Rosie Eyre, who coordinated the event, Edith Matthewson, who produced all the videos, and Stacey Allen, who coordinates all of our work in schools year round. And all of their work is coordinated by Charlotte Ryland, who you've spent the evening with tonight, and as you can see, is not only a kind of world expert in literary translation, but someone who really has real deep love and passion for the subject. I just want to flag up a few moments that really caught my imagination tonight. There was something Taher said about the work he does in schools, where he begins by saying, "I don't know what language I dream in." That just really left me thinking and wondering, what language do any of us dream in? I thought there was a fascinating example of literary, the kind of circles that translation can go in, when we had our open category and the Irish poet and her friend, who was the translator, speaking to each other about the poem moving between languages and becoming a revelation to its own author when she saw it in English. And then there was the comment from one of our younger entrants about the Mexican song that she'd grown up with her mother singing it, saying, I think she said something like, "I can cry with the song, I can laugh with the song, I can be angry with this song." And I thought, if only all literature and poem could have that same effect, it would be very, very powerful. Now, we have a tradition at the end of the Stephen Spender Prize that I now invite all the winners, commendees, judges, and the Stephen Spender Trust team to switch on their cameras. I'm going to count down from 10 to 1. And when I get to 1, I would like to invite you all to say thank you in as many languages I think we have someone here who's got 8 or 10 languages, so let's really go for it. As many languages as you know, and just to say a big thank you to everyone else tonight. So quickly count down 10, 9. Oh, someone said I should count down in multiple languages myself. I don't have the mental capacity to do that. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Obrigado.
Merci bien.
Arigatou gozaimasu.
Gracias.